So the next best thing was just to get a pistol and end it. And I sat at my house for 3 days straight, no sleep, didn't eat, didn't drink anything, with a pistol on my coffee table, just rocking back and forth. Picked that pistol up many times. It was just, again, like I didn't know how to handle it.
Welcome to the Winners Find a Way show. I am your host, Trent Clark. This is episode 14, Servant Leadership with Kevin Santiago, part 2. Kevin's life story is one of amazement. After having a college and pro baseball career, then unexpectedly struggling in business and his personal life, he turned to many challenges of alcohol and then ultimately a poor decision after suicidal thoughts that led him to prison. But he found the way, the truth, and the life following Jesus Christ. And he is doing that now as a coach and as a follower you will not want to miss as he walks us through finding his life purpose through Jesus Christ, what happens inside the prison, developing his prison ministry, and why his quote, "Society's starving for authenticity and genuineness." Listen as Kevin shines some light on a tough challenge and how he's coming through on the other side with redemption. Let's talk about something you just touched on, really important, like my heart and my head. What happens when those two are incongruent, right? Like, because my head says, heck yeah, like no prison, I'm down with it. But your heart's going, that's not okay, bro. Like, you know better.
Yeah, it's tough. It's almost, it's an internal war. Like, the initial, like I said, the initial response was, hell yeah, like we're good. But like right away, and I reference like my union mouth because I remember like listening to Eminem working out, and like after a while, like the Holy Spirit was just working inside me, like every time I cursed, and I remember reaching out to Bobby, like, why does it hurt when I swear now, and he's just like, just keep reading your Bible, So that was the same warfare I was having on that day. Like, I'm like, cool. And then right away, the Holy Spirit's like, no, the right thing to do is this. When it hit hard.
It's so interesting because I just read something about this with a couple, right? Who, fell in love at a young age, stayed pure into this thing, started their marriage in the right way. And it was very intriguing to me that the guy had been in just like the chemical reaction of their marriage being in pure and in sync with their faith and everything they did and quote unquote, abstinence, doing it the right way, all that stuff, right? He talked about how I would hurt going away on business trips, like being away from her. Like I felt like this connectedness that I don't think a lot of people feel anymore in marriages because we come into it pretty broken, right? And he talked about that. But one of the things that he talked about that really just stuck with me was, hey, the first time I was, not the first time, but one of these times he's away from home after a couple of years, someone says, hey, check out this pornographic image. And he was repulsed by it. And I'm like, whoa, I don't know too many men who aren't intrigued by it, right? Like, repulsion is not the usual response people get, right? It's like, whoa, show me more. I want some of that. Like, I'm interested, I'm intrigued. And our society's like, yeah, I'm a man. Let's go to, something society says is cool and manly and testosterone like, right? And he was like almost physically ill is what he said about it. And I thought, man, I would love, and I've never had, and of course, as a 51-year-old man, I have had images in front of me, of course. And so, I've never had that feeling. I've never, of a repulsion where I felt physically ill. Now, listen, I turn away. I'm not intrigued by that. At the same time, there's a time, right, that didn't feel so, hey, let me walk away. I'm walking away, but how far do I get where I can still see it? Like, I don't know that I'm running away, right? No tools in my toolbox, right? And so I was like, so that's interesting that you talk about this. Like now, like I have a different level of like, ooh, that automatically is a negative for me. It just feels wrong. It triggers something inside me that says that I've never had before. So the tools are changing.
And it was interesting you brought that up because like last night, I'm coaching first base and, we had a pretty nice crowd, dollar beers, like.
Oh, dollar beer night. That's always.
All right. So the rowdies are out and, they're yelling at me at first base, left hand for a woman's rear end and a right hand for a woman's chest, right? Like, I just shook my head. Like, for me, it's disappointing.
Yeah.
Especially in independent ball, like there's a lot of kids running around,
Yes.
things like that. And I get the fun of it, but they're only like, I saw that same script from a major league game, right? Like, so
Yeah.
they're not even original about it,
Right.
but that's where we're at today.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah. I mean,
it's okay to do that in front of kids. And I just wasn't going to participate in it as much as it wasn't a big deal. Right.
Yeah.
Like nobody probably would have thought about it a week from now if I did,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
Yeah. It's funny, having children. I'm one of those guys who says things, right? Like my kids are there. I'm like, hey, kids present. Like my dad did, right? Like my dad, like when kids were around and someone started saying something. Now, granted, it's just the 70s, right? Right. But like, man, my dad was like, hey, buddy, not okay. And like, you just got the tone. Like the guy was like, I never saw someone challenge my dad. My dad's like 5'6", 170 pounds, right? Like this is not like a large man, right? But like the tone was authoritative, right? Yep. And I embarrassed the snot out of my kids. Like I got kids sitting in front of me in a movie theater dropping F-bombs. I'm like, oh no.
Yeah.
Like I'm sitting with my kids, man. Like, hey, clean it up, boys.
Right.
Like I'm not having it. And they're like, sorry, I don't have people challenging me, but I know when I talk about that, like, I think a lot of people in society won't say anything. They just like, oh, well, I don't, something could happen.
Right.
Well, something's already happening that's not okay.
Right.
And sometimes that tolerance is acceptance.
Yep.
It's a tough deal. And I get it that you're not gonna maybe stand up in front of, 4,000 people here at the stadium, right? But like, I appreciate that, hey, my role is I'm not going to partake.
Right.
Not okay. I love it. All right. So before we come like post, right? I'm reminded quickly of some of I'd like you to share a story a little bit about your prison ministry, because I recently read Chuck Colson's book, Born Again. Chuck Colson was, Nixon's right hand, right, in the 70s. And of course, also the fall guy, like the guy who took it and started a prison ministry, right? I mean, that's what he did. And, it was amazing to hear the stories of his life there, which is a good portion of the book, talking about like people being there that didn't even know why they were there because the system had somewhat let them down. Like they didn't know how to read and write. They were just say, hey, you were charged for this. And they were like, I don't know, and lost their livelihoods, lost their ability to provide for their families. It was challenging, but definitely a guy who was willing to step out and be a light in a dark environment, and does not describe it as easy as well. I think that was for sure. But why don't you speak to a little bit of your time in that prison ministry? I know you've had a chance to share with some people, and life changed some things for you, how you could be positive for somebody else.
Yeah. So, I got sentenced. I did sentenced to 3.5 years. So I was like armored up, ready to go. And Bobby and Paul really set that foundation of what a Bible study looked like, and then I think, we were meeting with, Jason Walsh and those guys on Fridays, right? And then we were going to the men's group on Saturdays, right? Like 60 guys right there, like really authentic guys, like sharing their struggles and being in the support system, right? Like what the church is called to do. So I go in and I already had an idea of what it looked like, right? So I wouldn't say it was too difficult, but like you were saying, like the system really failed people. Like no matter how many programs you put in there, it's not going to change. Evil's in there. Evil's not, like, the only way you're going to change that is through the heart. Like I saw 2 or 3 guys, like, again, I did 16, 18 months in there. I saw 2 or 3 guys like come back. And that's,
in that time they left and were already back.
Yeah. Like breaking parole, stuff like that, and it's just, again, it's disappointing, but
you're in a state prison.
Yeah. It was just one of those things, like, made it known that I was a Christian. There's a lot of Christians on deck, and I'm not like toot my own horn, but like, we would go to chapel on Sundays And then guys would come back and watch Empire and talk about what they would do to so and so on the show.
Yeah. Right.
Again, it was disappointing. God's standard. And I knew my need for Jesus Christ in my life. And I knew I was there for a purpose, and that was it. I wasn't there to make friends or anything, like just be the light. So we got started. I remember it came early. Like I got challenged, from different religious groups, I guess you can say. And I'm not a guy to talk about things. I'm like, don't give me a warning. Don't tell me what you're going to do. Just do it. And this is out in the hallway when we're cleaning our rooms and stuff. And, I got challenged twice like that. I'm like, stop telling me what you're going to do to me and just do it already. Like, if we're going to go, we're going to go. So that just brought a lot of respect, I guess, when I was on deck, so then I started a Bible study. It started with like me and two other guys. It grew to about 12 guys, up and down throughout, guys were leaving and stuff. But I remember one guy, like, it's exhausting, right? Like, you see these guys and you're trying to build them up and get them a solid foundation. And that's the thing, is like everybody's at different stages in their faith, right? Like,
yeah,
they're still young, so to speak, as compared to where I was at, or I just had better training or whatever it was, so it was exhausting listening to these guys and try to be a support system for them, because they wanted it, it was real. So, and I just remember praying. There's a prayer in the Bible, prayer Jabez, that asks to increase territory. I remember praying that, and my territory did increase. But I also prayed for, I needed to see the fruit of my labor, right? Like all this work that I was doing with these guys, like I needed something. Like 2 weeks later, this guy will get shipped in. About a month into it, we're just kind of doing whatever. He came up to me and he's like, "Hey man, I heard you're the Christian on deck. Like, do you mind if we talk?" And I was like, "No, man, like let's do it." And told me like he lost his dad like 10 years prior, in an automobile accident, like not drug related or alcohol related or anything. But
so pretty young guy when that happened. Pretty young.
Right. Yeah, but he wrote God a letter talking about how much he hated him for taking his dad. Since then, Will had like 5 DUIs. He was getting blackout drunk. Like he didn't care if he killed somebody. He didn't care if he died. He was over it. So him and I met every week. He would come. We would do Deck's Bible study, like everybody. And then
does he have people outside waiting for him? Like, does he have people in his life that
didn't at the time? Like he had his sister and mom, but
okay, got it.
So him and I, we did a special Bible study, just him and I, one-on-one, and we went through the book of James, talking about trials and about that, like just do what it says, right? So
yeah, well, the trials, just pure joy. It's pure joy right there. Consider it pure joy, these trials. Like right. I can imagine that you and Will are sitting there going, "This is so joyful. We're both in prison, and how joyful we are that we get to go through these trials," right?
Right. Yeah. So Will, I was able to see like huge change in his heart every week, and he started getting that tug on when he would swear and stuff. And it was just cool to see, so I got out like November 9th or 11th, and he got out the day before Thanksgiving of the same year. So he reached out to me on Facebook, and he was just like, "Hey man, I just want to let you know you saved another man's life in there. Like I have a completely different outlook on life. I understand God works, and we don't have to know why. Sometimes he doesn't reveal it to us." He's like, I'm ready to do this." So I would check in on him every now and then. And he was a supervisor. He was a foreman doing carpentry work, framing, building houses. He was getting married. He got married, had a kid on the way. He was going to marriage retreats, like just to build that foundation, that marriage foundation. And it was awesome, man. And I get more joy from seeing that than, anything that this world has to offer. Watching a Big Ten championship game, my Buckeyes rolling around and just tearing teams up. But it's like, yeah, that's fun. But I get so much joy. It's like a 2-week high for me, man, when guys are like, when you see that change in their heart and they're changing their life, it's just powerful.
It's good. Let me ask you a question. Like looking back, What would you have done differently? You think you could have avoided it all? Do you think you needed this in your life? Like, would you have done something differently?
No, the life I'm living now is so peaceful. Like there's wants, like I want more money, I want this, I want that, but it doesn't bring me that joy and that peace. Like I'm not striving. Like I've had the money, the house, the car, the
Yeah,
girl.
yeah.
I don't. It's not that I don't want it anymore. Like that'd be great, but touching guys' hearts, being here like on the field, like I tell everybody, like I get to go to work today, right? Like I think you met Alex, mental skills coach at St. Xavier. Like she just got hired on with the Brewers, and I was talking to her yesterday, and I was just like, hey, we both get to go to work now, because not that she wasn't happy, but she wasn't. And now she's at the Brewers complex out in Scottsdale, and I was like, yeah, we both get to go to work now, So to change anything, I wouldn't. I see so many things that happened in my life where God was trying to get my attention, and I was just so hard-headed, and
Yeah.
I needed this in my life. I mean, I remember sharing my testimony at a church in Hammond, Indiana, with a guy that prayed for me in 2007. That I would come to Christ, and so I went there, and he's like, hey, do you want to share a little bit of your testimony? I'm like, nah, some other time, man. We're good. I was just here to see you, and he wasn't even preaching that day. And again, like as soon as he got up there to talk and kind of see everybody out, like the Holy Spirit's just like wrenching me, right?
Yeah.
So I tell him like, Hammer, I'll talk. So I get up there, like a little 5-minute thing about what happened, talked about my suicide my thoughts and, depression and stuff. And there was a kid there that like tried committing suicide that week, and his mom reached out to me, and just like, he was completely moved by my heart. Since then, he's gotten baptized and completely changed his life, and just a different outlook and stuff,
Got some hope.
Yeah, he had some hope. But yeah, like to see how God's tried to get a hold of me, how he's got a hold of me, and then how he's used me. I'd still go through it all, And I told my buddies that too. I mean, society says drink, like go ahead and drink, but don't drive, right? Like, so I mean, I think we've all been at that point where we on that line, like I'm all right, and all my buddies have families and kids, wives, and it was a big wake up for them.
I was going to say that I don't know if you get to our age in the 40s or 50s that you don't know friends that have had an alcohol related death. I mean, whether it's, a kid, a friend of the family who leaves a graduation party and jacks it up and loses a whole future, a whole life ahead of them, right?
Mhm.
Or friends I grew up with who, make an error with all a bunch of young families and one person who probably shouldn't have been where they should have been, and tragic, right? Like, because the impact is, multiple people, wives, kids. I mean, it's just, I just don't know if I know anyone that comes our age that doesn't have that impact in their life somehow.
Yeah, and they were just like, it was a big wake up for us. I know two guys, two buddies of mine that are just like, I'm just done. I don't need it. There's too much at risk now, because it was too close to home. And I've told them like I'm going through this for you, right? If this wakes up 2 or 3 guys, then it's all worth it.
Why don't you let's do a quick Q&A before we finish up here. What is describe being the leader you want to be?
That leader is just that. It's funny because like I look at the players on the field, right, and you have the pitchers and the hitters, and then there's the manager that manages all of it, right? And you got your pitching coach and you got your hitting coach. So for me, I think the leadership on my end, I think the manager has to be pretty even keel, not too high, not too low. Pitching coach, like pitchers, especially lefties, are kind of quirky stuff, So I think a pitching coach kind of has to be that. And then we all know like the hitting side of it is just very negative. So like for me, I drive our skip pretty nuts about how positive I am. Like guys are always like, hey, can you come in? Can you come in? Can you come in? And like, I'm like, yeah. And he's like, you don't have to do this every single day. Like you can organize it better. I'm like, you're right, I can, but I want them to be who they are, and I will be there for them, whatever.
Meet them where they're at.
Right. So usually I'm at the yard like about a half hour ago. Like I just get in. Guys will start coming in 1:30, 2 o'clock, and we do that. Do some early work stuff. And I didn't have anything on the schedule today other than lunch, my favorite barbecue joint down the street at 2. And, one of the players hits me up last night, like, hey, Sonny, are you going to be at the field? I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to be there till late though. I'm like, what's up? He's like, I just want to see if we can get some early work in. Absolutely. I'll be there at 3 o'clock. Let's get it in before BP.
Yeah.
Things like that. So that servant, like we talked earlier, like that servant leadership, being positive, like smiling, like letting them know that everything's all right. I had a guy smoke 2 balls yesterday. We were really working on some things, and it kind of finally saw it play out yesterday. They didn't result in anything other than on the data it comes up as 106 off the bat. And he was kind of down, and he's like, I got nothing to show for it. I'm like, you don't need anything to show for it. Like,
yeah,
like if you need raw data, like here it is, like the hardest ball you hit since the season started, right? But again, it's just pulling up next to them, meeting them where they're at, and like, hey, let's go. Like we're in this together, right? Like same thing with the championship team in 18. Like those guys saw how much I worked, right? Like just whatever they needed, like, let's go. Well, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. And I didn't have a lot of knowledge at the time. The game had changed a little bit. I had kept up on some of it, and I explained that to them. Like, I don't have all the answers. I still tell the guys this, like, you have plenty of friends that are involved in baseball. I have plenty of friends that are involved in baseball, and we're going to figure this thing out. Like,
learning.
But I'm the first one to say, no idea.
Yeah, I think that lifelong learning never stops, whatever career you're in. And for people who don't know baseball, the reason Kevin says hitting's negative is that hitting is 70% failure, and that means you're an all-star, right? So there's a lot of 80% failure, not uncommon, called the Mendoza line, which is kind of the break or make of any kind of organization. If you can't hit that line, then you probably shouldn't be where you're at, right? So it's a very fractional deal. I mean, you're talking about 2 hits to 3 hits is from not ever being able to go out and play again to $6 million a year. So that's a very fractional deal. So you can imagine what happens over 100 at bats. It's becomes very important. And there is, I think it's one of the reasons children are leaving Little League is that it's a lot of negative. It's not, you don't go out there and get success every time. You have to work at it, which is one of the reasons I love about the game. I love that it doesn't come so easy, that there's some stick-to-itiveness. There's some perseverance that's required to be successful. But I will tell you, the one thing that I always learn from, I can't imagine someone walking up at that top level, even at the high school level, right? Who goes, well, that was too hard. I'll be taking myself out of the game after the first inning, and I won't be trying anymore, right? Yet in society, we do that all the time, right? Like, hey, listen, I picked up the guitar and I tried to strum it once. It didn't work out, so I'm not doing it again. Well, hold on. Wait, like, no. You're going to get to do it 4 more 5 more times. Let's see how it shakes out. Like, we got to get the reps. We got to practice. And that kind of goes to anything to get that success level.
I've bought 2 acoustic guitars in my lifetime. Like,
yeah,
like I said, I'm going to learn how to play this thing. And I never did. But I think, again, it goes back to having that support, having somebody there that can help you and, figure it out together, right? Like,
yeah. Well, someone's supporting you going, hey, man, that's your first chord. That sounded all right. Like, let's keep going, right? Like, this is good. You what's the positive side of it? Yeah, I'm no Eddie Van Halen yet, but, I'm learning, I'm trying to get her right,
Right. Yeah, having self-awareness is key when you're learning something new.
Well, and I think you learned along your journey, right? Part of that self-awareness around your pride and arrogance and how that maybe didn't serve you.
Yep.
as a young man, like you'd hoped. And as athletes, by the way, some of that serves us, right? That confidence level. And then there's this really fine line of confidence to arrogance, and you cross it and it's like you can't go back, right? It's like, oh no, like I'm on the other side of the fence and no one will let me back in, right? And and but people don't know it, right? They don't even know they crossed the line yet. And
Yeah.
so that's, I think, a big part of that self-awareness, which part of your lesson. But let's before we finish here, I want you to, anything that we didn't cover, it's time for the best way to win. I mean, is there something you want to share with folks, that listeners, that we didn't touch on today? Like, hey, I'm always reminded of the McChesney and from Four Disciplines of Execution: winners, when shown data that they are losing, find a way to win. I mean, what do you think your best way is to overcome that when things aren't going the right direction? What's your kind of go-to, and what do you tell these young folks that you're working with?
Well, I think like my thing is just figure it out, right? Like how by any means necessary, right? Like you call your guys, I'll call my guys. Let's look at the data. Let's look at your swing. Let's look at video. Figure it out. Is it mental, right? Like where are we at? What are you doing when you get in the box? Are you resetting every pitch? What's your approach at? Like, right? Like, and sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes they're just under the ball, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they just swung through it. Sometimes bug got in their eye and they're just swinging because they couldn't see whatever. Like,
When you say figure it out, I mean, it sounds like to me you're saying I take an inventory of the 8 things that's required of you to be successful in the box, let's say, okay, as a hitter. So you say, all right, inventory. Mentally, are you ready? Physically, are you prepared? Have you done the reps? Is your swing where you want it to be? Let's look at the video from where you were when you were going well to when you weren't going well. I mean, you have 8 or 10 triggers, video, all sorts of things that you look at data to figure out, like, hey, here's one of the 8 that it's not there, right? Like and until we get, because we know in hitting, like all those 8 kind of got to align, right? We're back to heart and head, right? They got to kind of align to make it go forward.
right. I got one guy that's a returner from our 19 season, and he had a pretty good season, and he's struggling right now. He's not doing the same stuff that he did in 19. And I was like, well,
as far as preparedness,
yep, routine's different. And we talked about it. Skip had one of his younger kids from his travel org out here, and we sent him out to the infield with this player, and they were just talking, and the player comes in and he's like, Sonny, I haven't been sticking to my routine that I did for the last 2 off seasons. Like I knew it changed, but I just thought it was what you were doing. And he's like, no, I'm not doing that at all. Right. So like at that moment he figured it out, hopefully. We're 2 games past that. And he's starting to hit the ball a little bit harder, but there's definitely some checkpoints that we hit. And again, that's where self-awareness comes in. Like the player can say like, yeah, I'm locked in, or, I'm positive. I got that positive self-talk, but your body language is telling me something different, right?
Yeah.
Like you're lying to yourself, just things like that. Like you said, there's checkpoints that we touch on, and from that point on, we try to figure it out from there.
Well, I think it's a good example of, we don't go running away from what worked before. Like we don't go running away from good routines. We drift on it, right? Like all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, yeah, I haven't really been doing up. I wake up an hour later and I always feel like I'm behind, and I didn't get my prep work in. So because I woke up, I don't eat as well in the morning. And, it's just downstroke of like, hey, what worked? And little changes, are big things, and when I talk about that drift, I'm often reminded of the flight to LA to New York. If you miss it by 1 click, right, on dial of setting it, you land in DC, right? like it's like, it's just a little drift. Like, well, you land way off, bro. Like it's you are not getting to the destination that you want to go to. And that's just, 1 degree off in that mark, right? Because that's a length, right? And so of course you and I both know that, we're probably 4 or 5 degrees off. So, hey, I was headed for Denver and landed in Austin. What the hell happened? Right? Like, not good. Like we're drifting faster in a shorter duration because we're a couple clicks off. Right.
Right.
All right.
But it goes the same way too, in a positive direction. Like, these guys are here because they lost who they are. Like, some guys didn't get drafted. Some guys got released from affiliated clubs, and they kind of lost who they were. So when they get here, it's like, hey, let's get back to who you were when you got drafted. But at the same time, like, we have to make adjustments to get you back there. You know what I mean? So we have to drift off from who they were on a positive note.
Yes.
So,
shore up those areas that take you outside of that pathway of where you want to go, right? And yeah, sometimes we don't even know what those are. All right, before we go, I'd like to hear your favorite verse, quote, go to. What do you go to? What do you live by? What do you recommend when things are down? What kind of sets you back onto your foundation? For me, I want to thank Kevin Santiago before we go, and he tells me this, for coming on. Like, Kevin, you're just a special guy to me. You inspire me every day, and I'm thrilled. For everyone else, please follow the YouTube live show, Leadershipity channel. Winners Find a Way. We are on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. You can find us either at Leadershipity or at Trent M. Clark. Those are all my handles on social. Leadershipity.com is our website. Look for our upcoming ebook, The Pyramid of Leadershipity. Excited about that. If you want to talk with me about how we build and help teams win with your organizations looking to get better and leaders, DM or email me, and we show how to win with great teams. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate us 5-star, subscribe to the channel, get on Winners Find a Way. We work hard to bring you 1% content, and Kevin, of course, did not disappoint. Always so good, my man. So tell me your go-to. What's your thing, man?
Well, it's not my go-to, but my favorite quote is from you.
Oh,
when I got a hard stop at 1:00.
Oh, yeah. Hard stop.
And you never hit it.
Never hit it. They're not together.
Like, way over. No, but my quote for me to kind of get my bearings, my foundation comes from James 1:12. Blessed is the man who perseveres through trials.
Nice.
It's everybody's going through something, and It doesn't have to be this huge accident that gets you 7 to 14 years, right? It can be, marriage stuff.
Yeah.
Like struggling to find a gift, right? Like,
yeah.
It can be, eating better, just little things throughout the day. Those are all trials. It's something that everybody's dealing with.
Yeah.
But you're blessed when you persevere through that stuff, and I once asked my counselor, I said, and that was another thing too. Like, I had her support from the get-go. I was meeting with her sometimes twice, 2-3 times a week. It felt like, but, I said, how does one not persevere through this? Right? Like, I just felt like I didn't have a choice of getting through this. She's like, you did. You chose not to pull the trigger that night. Right?
Yeah. Yes.
She's like,
so half the decision, I think that's a really important one, right? Because when we talk about these decisions we make, it's not always the things we do. It's sometimes the things we don't do.
Right.
That are making decisions. That is persevering. Like, for what we talked about earlier with pornography, not opening the computer is a big step, right? And I think for all of us to remember just that, Kevin, I think would be really valued. Everybody's going through something. I know, like, when health started changing for my parents, and you're like, man, I remember my dad as my baseball coach and the guy throwing BP for me. And now I'm like, I got to help him, do simple things. And it's like, man, this is like, he doesn't even look like my dad anymore. Like, what you go and do with my dad?
Right.
And it's just like, it weighs, right? It weighs on us. And all of a sudden, I find myself stressed and snapping at a cashier because I got to go back to the, produce aisle to get something. Like, really? Like, man, like, she doesn't know, like, my dad's not well and I'm stressed about her, or there's financial issues, whatever it is, right? Like, it doesn't matter. Everyone's got something, some grace for that, I think, is a big deal in our culture. I think a grace that, hey, let's take a step back and be a little bit more sympathetic, a little bit more empathetic to that, because it's part of humanity, right? It's not easy. It's just not easy. My quote today, by the way, for you, I think about my quotes every week. It's really important. Like, I really want to focus in on my guests for the week. And my quote for you, Kevin, was Proverbs 19:21. Many are the plans in a man's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. As I think about that, like I know I'm one of these guys who's a planner. I got in my mind how it's going to go, and then it never goes the way I think it's going to go, right? And so, I realized, like, hey, all good plans, right?
That reminds me of when we were going to meet with Spezio.
Right?
And we're driving out there, and you're like, so what are we going to talk about? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, are you going to tell him your story? I'm like, yeah. You're like, what happens if he asks us to leave? Like, then we leave. Like, I'm like, why are we trying to figure this out? Like, it's already handled, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's right? The Lord's purpose, it's that prevails, right? And so, and I think what you said important really early, like, you don't have to understand it. I think that's okay, right? I think it's okay that you don't understand it. Yep. So I'm always reminded of that because, as you've inspired me through this, that purpose has always prevailed for you. And I mean, I look at some things, I know we all got wants, man. I would love to have this kind of car. And man, like, this is the neighborhood I'd probably rather be in and all that, the grass is always greener, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I have any more needs left. I just got a lot of wants like the rest of us Americans, right? We don't have a lot of needs because they're met,
Right.
And part of that is that we realize that there's a lot of great things. There's a lot of great things to be grateful for. And what success to one person, as much as you say, hey, what somebody's going through and having empathy and sympathy for that. I think there's also hey, my idea of success is not Kevin's idea of success, is not my next door neighbor's success. I mean, is not someone coming out of university. We all got different identifiers of what we're going for. And I don't think any of them are necessarily wrong, right? Like we're on a path to what we think is best for us. And I mean, having some respect and honor for that, I think is a big one. But in the end, it may not be our purpose, right? And we have to yield.
Yeah, I remember someone reached out to me about starting like a development program, and we just our thoughts about where it should go and how it should get there just didn't line up. Mm-hmm. And he's like, this is a chance for you to be successful, and he knows my story, right? Like,
yeah.
And I'm like, but I already am.
Yeah.
Like I'm with 24 guys every single day for 5 months, right? And I'm constantly walking the walk, showing them showing the light. Like if I have an opportunity to I had a discussion with a player yesterday, just a little bit about my story. I didn't get into details about it, but like that for me, that's successful. Like wherever it's at, it doesn't have to be on the ball field, it doesn't have to be in major league ballparks, right? Like, I'm in my major league season, right? Like this is it. If I go there, like it doesn't matter where I'm at. I don't try. Like, would it be great? Like you said, like, yeah, it'd be awesome if I was a major league coach. Like if it works out, it works out. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm still successful every single place I'm at because it doesn't matter what level I'm at.
And would you change the way you go about your job? If you were, that's just geography, right? Like whether you're working with these kids today in the Frontier League or you're working over in Anaheim with me and the Angels, like it's just geography, what we're doing and what our values are, what we're actually trying to accomplish, right? There may be a couple different strategies that may be different, but does that change who the person you are?
Nope.
I don't think so. I love it. Let's sign off on that, Kevin. I mean, I love it. Let's end there. I mean, I'm just so thankful you coming on board. For everyone else, thank you for joining us today. You will find us on our Leadershipity YouTube channel always. Thank you for joining us, Kevin. Thanks so much. For everybody else, see you next Friday, every Friday, 12:30 Eastern, 9:30 a.m. Pacific, live on the Leadershipity YouTube channel. Winners find a way. We'll see you then.
Thanks, Trent.
Thank you for joining us for another Winners Find a Way show. I am your host, Trent Clark. If you love this episode, share this episode with your friends and follow us on whatever podcasting medium you're listening to. If you want more content from us, join us at leadershipity.com or the Leadershipity YouTube channel. You can find us on all the social media networks at either Trent M. Clark or Leadershipity for our award-winning workshop Win with Great Teams, you can find that page on LinkedIn, as well as our corporate page, Leadershipity. If you want to win more, it starts with you today. Say it with me now. I have what it takes.